The whispering paw print. The old house in Savannah sagged under the weight of its own memories, much like Martha Hayes herself. At 75, newly widowed and estranged from her only daughter, Eleanor, Martha felt the familiar ache of loneliness settle deep in her bones. The Grand Victorian, with its peeling paint and creaking floorboards, had once echoed with laughter. The clatter of Henry's tools in his workshop, and the bright, if sometimes defiant, voice of young Eleanor. Now only the soft rustle of Spanish moss in the ancient oaks outside, and the gentle snores of Barnaby, her late husband Henry's old bloodhound, broke the oppressive silence. It was a silence that amplified every regret, every unspoken word, every what if. Martha found what little solace she could in the meticulous care of her sprawling garden, a riot of azaleas and camellias that bloomed defiantly against the encroaching melancholy. She'd spent decades perfecting it, turning raw earth into a painter's palette of blossoms. Yet even among the vibrant hues, the ghosts of past arguments and unspoken words with Eleanor haunted her. 20 long years had passed since the bitter fight that sent her only daughter packing, leaving behind only a gaping wound in Martha's heart that refused to heal. She still replayed that day in her mind, the sharp words exchanged, the slammed door, the screech of tires fading into the distance. She remembered the fierce, unyielding pride on Eleanor's face, a mirror image of her own. One particularly melancholic, rain-swept evening, the house felt colder than usual, a damp chill seeping in through the old windows. Martha sat by the flickering fireplace in the living room, a half-finished watercolor of her beloved garden resting on the easel beside her. Untouched for days, the vibrant greens and pinks mocked her dull spirits. Barnaby, who usually dozed contentedly at her feet, a dark, velvety lump of fur and gentle snores, stirred. His low rumble began, a deep, mournful sound that pulsed through the quiet room, vibrating through the very floorboards. He rose, his heavy paws padding across the oriental rug, his long ears sweeping the dust from the polished wood. He stopped at the closed door of Martha's old art studio, a room Eleanor had loved as a child, where she'd first learned to mix paints, where the scent of turpentine and youthful dreams still seemed to linger. Barnaby whimpered, then began to scratch at the polished oak floor, his claws scraping rhythmically at a spot near the doorframe where nothing seemed to be. It was a faint, almost imperceptible mark, perhaps from a loose nail, but to Barnaby it was a focal point. "Barnaby, what is it, boy?" Martha murmured, setting down her half-empty teacup. He whined again, pushing his broad head against the door, his eyes, usually soft and sleepy, now wide and insistent, fixed on Martha with an unblinking intensity. Martha felt a strange, unsettling pull, a familiar intuition she hadn't trusted in years. Barnaby had always been perceptive, almost eerily so, especially when it came to Eleanor. He'd followed her like a shadow when she was a child, always a silent protector. This wasn't the first time his behavior had seemed to carry a deeper meaning, but never with such palpable urgency. It was as if he was trying to tell her something vital, something she desperately needed to hear. The next morning, the rain had subsided, leaving the air thick with the scent of damp earth and blooming jasmine. Barnaby's unusual behavior continued, the persistent, silent plea. After her meager breakfast, he nudged her hand, then trotted to the back door. Looking over his shoulder expectantly, Martha, feeling a stirring of curiosity mixed with her enduring sorrow, followed. He led her, nose to the ground, out to the sprawling, unkempt garden. He stopped at a long, neglected flower bed, a forgotten corner, choked with weeds and straggly, forgotten rose bushes. He began sniffing intently, his low growls a soft hum against the morning quiet. "What is it, old boy?" Martha asked, her voice raspy from disuse. He pawed at the tangled undergrowth, nudging a rusty garden trowel with his wet nose. Following his lead, Martha carefully cleared away the weeds, her old hands stiff but determined. Beneath a clump of withered ivy, half buried in the damp soil, she found it, a small, tarnished silver locket. Her breath hitched. It was Eleanor's. She remembered giving it to her on her 10th birthday, a small gesture of reconciliation after a particularly stormy mother-daughter day. It had a tiny etching of a paintbrush on one side, a nod to Eleanor's budding artistic talent. Martha's hands trembled as she forced open the corroded clasp. Inside, faded and barely visible, was a tiny crumpled photograph of Eleanor, no older than 12, her smile hesitant, her eyes already holding a depth beyond her years. On the back, in faint, almost illegible pencil, were the words, "Remember the bluebirds." Bluebirds? Eleanor had always loved bluebirds. Martha's mind drifted back to a sunny afternoon. Eleanor, a tiny whirlwind of energy, presenting her with a small, hand-painted wooden bluebird, a gift from art class. It had been placed on her bedroom windowsill, a splash of vibrant color. But what did it mean now? Back inside, Barnaby's next target was the old cedar chest in the attic, gathering dust under a shroud, unused since Henry had stored away his old military uniforms. Barnaby jumped up, placing his heavy paws on the lid, looking at Martha with those deep, knowing eyes, urging her on. With a sigh, Martha pulled off the dusty sheet. The chest was filled with forgotten linens, moth-eaten blankets, and old photo albums with cracked leather spines. Buried beneath a stack of quilts, Barnaby nudged out a slim, leather-bound book. It was an old poetry anthology, one of Eleanor's favorites, a collection of forgotten verses by obscure poets. As Martha opened it, a single dried, pressed forget-me-not fell onto the page, crumbling slightly at the edges. Tucked within the same page, a small, yellowed note fluttered out. It was Eleanor's familiar handwriting, though slightly smudged. "The whispers tell a tale." "The whispers?" Martha murmured, confused. It was getting stranger, more personal. Was Eleanor trying to communicate with her from the past? A shiver ran down Martha's spine. Barnaby whined softly, then trotted to the kitchen, his tail giving a slow, deliberate wag. He stopped at a cracked tile near the back door, nudging it with his wet nose. Martha knelt, running her hand over the cold ceramic. It felt loose, almost hollow underneath. Prying it up with a butter knife, she found a small, intricately folded paper crane tucked into the dark crevice. It was made from an old sheet of music, a lullaby Martha used to sing to Eleanor, a simple tune about starry nights and dreams. Inside the crane, in Eleanor's tiny, precise script, were the words, "Beneath the oldest branches, truth awaits." The oldest branches, the ancient oak in the far corner of the garden, the one with the swing set that had long since rusted and broken. Martha's heart quickened, a drum beating a new rhythm in her chest. Could Eleanor have left these clues? A trail of breadcrumbs leading to some revelation. Why now, after all these years of silence? Barnaby seemed to be guiding her, meticulously, with an almost uncanny precision. His incredible sense of smell, usually employed for tracking game or finding dropped crumbs under the sofa, now seemed attuned to the faint sense of old paper, dried flowers, and perhaps the lingering essence of her daughter's presence. He led her to forgotten corners, behind dusty shelves, under beds, unearthing old sketchbooks filled with Eleanor's youthful, vibrant drawings, a box of faded watercolors, and early, earnest attempts at poetry. Raw, passionate, and full of a yearning Martha hadn't recognized in her daughter's younger self. Each item was a tiny window into the mind of the daughter Martha felt she barely knew. A puzzle piece fitting into a picture she was only just beginning to see. As Martha painstakingly pieced together these fragments, a new, more complex image of Eleanor began to emerge. Not just the defiant teenager who had left, but a sensitive, artistic soul burdened by something unseen, something profound. She remembered fleeting conversations with Henry years ago, where he'd mentioned Eleanor seeming unusually withdrawn, almost haunted, in the days before she'd left. He'd once mentioned hearing her whisper about something she'd seen in town. Martha, caught up in her own frustrations and the emotional turbulence of their last argument, had dismissed it as teenage drama, Eleanor's artistic temperament exaggerating things. Now, a cold dread began to seep into her bones, replacing the dull ache of grief. What if it wasn't drama? What if Eleanor had seen something truly dangerous? Barnaby's next and most insistent signal led Martha to Henry's study, a room Martha had barely entered since his death. Overwhelmed by the grief it evoked, the heavy scent of old books and pipe tobacco still clung to the air. Barnaby nudged a dusty leather armchair, then scratched at an old mahogany desk, sniffing intently at a hidden compartment Martha never knew existed. Press the release button she found subtly carved into the side panel, and a small drawer slid open with a soft click. Inside, she found a small leather-bound journal, Henry's own, distinct from Eleanor's. His neat, precise handwriting filled the pages. He had documented his observations of Eleanor, her quiet conversations with him that she withheld from Martha, her growing fear and apprehension. He mentioned a specific day, a week before she left, when Eleanor had returned home pale and shaken, clutching her camera, her face ashen. Henry had suspected she had witnessed something significant, but Eleanor had refused to elaborate, only murmuring about keeping them safe. "Oh, Henry," Martha whispered, tears blurring her vision, falling onto the faded ink of his words. "You knew, didn't you? You tried to protect her. You tried to tell me." He had been a silent observer, a quiet protector, trying to understand his daughter when Martha, in her own stubborn way, had been blind. The guilt was suffocating, the culmination of Barnaby's determined quest, the crescendo of his quiet urgings, finally led them to the oldest, most gnarled oak in the farthest, most secluded corner of the garden. It was a truly ancient tree, its branches thick and twisted, draped in Spanish moss that swayed like mournful banners. Here, tucked under a sprawling root, stood the rusted remnants of the swing set Eleanor and Henry had spent countless afternoons on, their laughter echoing through the leaves. Under this mighty oak, Barnaby began to dig, his paws tearing at the damp earth with a frantic desperation Martha had never seen in him. He whined, a sound filled with a raw urgency, digging so intensely, so single-mindedly, that Martha knew this was it. This was the place. Martha grabbed a small garden trowel and began to help, her old hands aching, her back protesting, but driven by a force stronger than physical discomfort. The rich, damp scent of Savannah soil filled the air. Deeper, deeper they went, digging through roots and packed earth. Then, with a dull clink, the trowel struck something hard. Martha knelt, brushing away the dirt with trembling fingers. It was a small metal box, weathered and stained with time and dampness, but carefully sealed. A time capsule. Eleanor's time capsule. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic hummingbird. This was it, the truth. With trembling hands, Martha forced open the corroded clasp. Inside, nestled amongst layers of preserved tissue paper, were 3 items: a small, worn, leather-bound diary, clearly more recent than the old poetry book, its pages thick with secrets, a roll of undeveloped film still in its canister, and a delicate, almost mystical-looking pendant crafted from dark, polished wood and a single thin strip of oxidized metal shaped like a stylized paw print. It looked like something ancient, a talisman. Martha opened the diary first, her vision blurring as she recognized Eleanor's familiar handwriting. But the tone was different, raw, urgent, filled with fear and determination. She wrote of the escalating arguments with her mother, her feeling of being misunderstood, her desperate desire for independence. But then the true, shocking reason for her sudden departure emerged, starkly laid out on the aged pages. It wasn't just the arguments, Mama. It was what I saw. Eleanor, an aspiring photojournalist even then, barely 18, had been out taking pictures of Savannah's historic waterfront, capturing the crumbling beauty of old warehouses and the bustling activity of the docks. She'd stumbled upon a clandestine meeting. A prominent local official, Mayor Caldwell, a man Martha knew from community events, was accepting a large sum of cash from a shadowy figure, discussing what sounded like a massive land deal involving bribery and environmental violations. Eleanor, hidden behind some old fishing crates, had snapped photos, her heart pounding with the thrill of the scoop. But as she clicked the last shot, the shadowy figure had turned, and their eyes had met. A moment of chilling recognition. Eleanor was sure she'd been seen. She wrote of the cold dread that washed over her, the sudden, terrifying realization that her life was in danger. She couldn't tell her parents. She feared for their safety, knew they would try to protect her, and in doing so, put themselves in harm's way. She had to disappear to protect them. The bitter fight with Martha, the dramatic exit, it had provided the perfect, plausible cover for her sudden, urgent departure. I had to make you think I just ran away, Mama. I had to make it look like typical teenage rebellion. It broke my heart to leave you thinking that, but it was the only way to keep you safe from them, from Caldwell and his men. Tears streamed down Martha's face, hot and cleansing. The years of guilt, the agonizing questions, the bitter regret, all shattered into a million pieces, replaced by a wave of crushing understanding, of profound admiration for her daughter's courage and sacrifice. Eleanor hadn't abandoned her. She had saved her. Barnaby, who had been sitting patiently beside her, a silent, comforting presence, suddenly nudged the undeveloped film with his nose, then let out a soft whine. Martha's hands shook as she realized these were the photographs Eleanor had taken that day. The evidence. Barnaby had been there with Eleanor, a silent witness to her discovery and her fear. His strange behavior, his persistent pulling, his instinct to dig at this specific spot, he remembered. He was showing her the truth, the raw, terrifying truth that Eleanor couldn't vocalize directly. He had reacted to the residual emotional echo of Eleanor's fear and desperation, leading Martha to the hidden truth. The final pages of the diary contained a meticulously coded message, written in a child's playful script. It was a cipher based on the childhood games they used to play, a specific pattern of words from Martha's favorite nursery rhymes, combined with numbers corresponding to pages and lines in a particular, well-worn collection of Grimm's fairy tales that Martha kept on her bedside table. It was a code only Martha, with her intimate knowledge of Eleanor's quirks and childhood fascinations, could ever hope to break. The message detailed a point of contact and a key to her location. The wooden paw print pendant, that was the key. Martha examined it closely. It was intricately carved, smooth beneath her thumb, but felt heavier than wood. A small, almost invisible seam ran along its edge. With a tiny click, it opened, revealing a hidden micro SD card, no bigger than her thumbnail. Martha raced inside, Barnaby trotting eagerly behind her, his tail wagging with a newfound lightness. She knew exactly what to do. Eleanor had an old, clunky laptop, a relic from the early 2000s, stashed in the back of her closet, tucked away with old art supplies and discarded canvases. Martha had always meant to donate it, thinking it useless. Now it was their lifeline, a direct connection to her daughter. She powered it on, the screen flickering to life with a familiar, outdated operating system. With trembling fingers, she inserted the micro SD card into the tiny slot. A single video file appeared on the desktop, simply titled, "For Mama." Martha clicked on it, her heart thumping a frantic rhythm. Eleanor's face filled the screen, older, wiser, a faint scar running through her left eyebrow that Martha hadn't noticed before. She looked tired, lines of experience etched around her eyes, but determined, resolute. "Mama," her voice, soft but clear, resonated through the quiet room, a sound Martha had yearned to hear for 2 decades. If you're seeing this, it means you found it. You found the time capsule. And Barnaby, oh, Barnaby, he always knew, didn't he? A gentle, knowing smile touched Eleanor's lips as she looked directly into the camera, as if seeing Martha through the lens of time. She explained everything in more detail. The intricate web of corruption she uncovered, the need to disappear instantly, the years of living under a different name. Constantly vigilant, always looking over her shoulder, but also the profound satisfaction of continuing her fight. Now, as an investigative journalist, using her skills to expose injustice from the shadows, her camera still her most potent weapon. "I couldn't contact you directly, Mama. It was too risky. They were watching. I knew you'd try to find me, and that would put you in danger. But I also knew you'd find a way. I knew Barnaby would help. He remembers things, doesn't he?" "He's always been more than just a dog. He was my protector, my silent confidant, my guardian angel." I left him with you because I knew he would eventually lead you to the truth when the time was right." Eleanor's eyes welled up, mirroring Martha's own tears. "I'm so sorry for the pain I caused you, for the silence, for making you believe I just left out of anger. But I couldn't risk them finding you. I wanted to tell you I loved you always, every single day. And now, I'm leaving you one last clue, a place where we can finally meet. When you're ready, when you understand." The video ended with a hand-drawn map, simple coordinates, and a new encrypted phone number. The location was a small, unassuming art gallery in a remote mountain town in North Carolina, far from the humid heat at Savannah. The next morning, the sun rose, painting the Savannah sky in hues of soft pink and orange. Martha, a new sense of purpose thrumming in her veins, packed a small bag. With Barnaby comfortably settled in the passenger seat, his long ears flapping in the breeze from the open window, she began the long drive. The old Victorian house, usually a source of comfort, now felt like a closed chapter, a book whose story she had finally understood. She had found her purpose, her quest. The mountain air was crisp and cool as they approached the small town, nestled like a forgotten jewel among towering pines. The gallery was small and rustic, its wooden facade weathered by time, with large windows showcasing vibrant, abstract paintings. Martha's heart hammered in her chest, a mixture of anticipation and fear. She walked inside, Barnaby trotting calmly beside her, his tail giving a slow, steady wag. A woman with kind eyes and a familiar tilt to her head, her dark hair streaked with silver, was hanging a striking, vibrant painting of a lone figure against a stormy sky. She turned at the sound of the bell above the door. Her eyes, filled with a deep, quiet strength, met Martha's. For a long moment, time seemed to stand still. "Eleanor?" Martha whispered, her voice cracking. A question and a plea intertwined. Eleanor's face crumpled. A wave of disbelief, then profound relief, washed over her, followed by a surge of overwhelming emotion. She dropped the painting she was holding, rushing forward, wrapping her arms around her mother. "Mama," Eleanor sobbed, holding her tight, burying her face in Martha's shoulder. "You found me. You really found me." Barnaby, usually reserved around strangers, whined softly, nudging Eleanor's hand with his wet nose. Eleanor knelt, burying her face in his soft fur, her tears falling onto his velvety coat. "Oh, Barnaby," she murmured, her voice choked with emotion. "My wise old friend, my brave boy." Eleanor led Martha to a back room, a small, vibrant studio filled with colorful paintings, canvases stacked against the walls, the faint scent of oils and turpentine filling the air. She explained her life over the past 2 decades, the constant vigilance, the fear, but also the deep satisfaction of exposing the truth, even from the shadows. She showed Martha her latest work, a series of powerful, haunting images depicting hidden injustices. Each piece a silent protest, a testament to her unwavering spirit. "I always hoped you'd understand," Eleanor confessed, her voice soft, filled with a quiet vulnerability Martha had rarely seen. "That you'd see why I had to go. I knew Barnaby would lead you. He always sensed things, didn't he? He's been my only real connection to home, even when I couldn't be there myself. I knew I could trust him to bring you to me when the time was right. Martha finally understood. The anger, the resentment, the years of self-blame all melted away, replaced by profound admiration for her daughter's unwavering courage and incredible sacrifice. She apologized for her misunderstanding, for her stubbornness, for not seeing the deeper truth behind Eleanor's actions. "It's okay, Mama," Eleanor said, squeezing her hand, a genuine smile finally gracing her lips. "We both did what we thought was right, and now we're here, together." The reunion was bittersweet, a quiet, profound moment of healing. Eleanor couldn't fully return to her old life in Savannah, the threat still lingering. But now, a fragile, beautiful bridge had been built between them. Martha, her artist's eye renewed by this unexpected revelation, saw not just a daughter she had lost, but a hero, a tenacious spirit who had fought for justice. She decided to stay in the quiet mountain town for a while, setting up her easel in Eleanor's sunlit studio, painting the serene landscapes, but also, for the first time in years, capturing the true spirit of her daughter in vibrant watercolors. Barnaby nestled contentedly between them, his head resting on Eleanor's lap, seemed to radiate a quiet joy. His job finally done. He had been the unspoken link, the constant whisper of truth, reminding them that some bonds, forged by love and protected by loyalty, could never truly be broken. Not by time, not by distance, and certainly not by years of silence. The old house in Savannah would forever hold its memories. But here, in the mountains, a new story of forgiveness, understanding, and unwavering connection had begun to unfold, painted in hues of hope and quiet courage. A testament to the enduring power of a mother's love and a dog's faithful heart.